I'm Al McFarland. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarland. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Friday. Friday means we are in the healing circle. And as always, we promise and we deliver what we call robust conversation. We thank you for participating. We want you to let your friends know, your colleagues know that we are live right now. Use your social media and send a tweet or a post, make a phone call, send a text, and let somebody know that we're going to have a great conversation in this hour and in the healing circle. Before we begin, I want to remind and invite you, the viewers on our channels, our platforms, to support this work by becoming a subscriber. You do that by going to YouTube /Insight News MN and simply subscribe, like, and share. We're well north of 500. Our goal is to get 1,000 subscribers, and then we'll keep going from there. But we have to do it one subscriber at a time. Your subscription is the one that matters right now. Please subscribe and tell somebody, bring somebody else as well. Well, I want to begin, as we always do, welcoming our co-hosts, my partners in this, Dr. Brevada Garrett Akinsanya, who heads the African American Child Wellness Institute and Break-ins Consulting and Psychological Services. He's the principal there. And Dr. Oliver Williams, who's a professor of sociology at social work, right, at the University of Minnesota. The three of us have just a wonderful gathering talking about anything having to do with health and wellness every week. And we bring in special guests who bring their perspectives, their stories, their narratives. And we hope that the doing of this is part of the healing process. Well, before we begin and bring in our special guest, Cheryl Thomas, who is the founding director of an organization called Global Rights for Women. We'll hear her story and engage her on this work of healing around the globe. Before we do that, we always begin with a protocol. So I welcome my leader, Dr. Brevada Garrett Akinsanya. Dr. B, how you doing? Good to see you always.
I'm happy to see you today and just excited about our guest and our topic of dealing, especially with safety and support of women's issues. Today, we're going to start like we always do every Friday when we have Healing Circle. We begin by just deeply breathing and preparing ourselves to be open to the universe to give us health, wellness, prosperity, hope, peace, and freedom. And as we enter this circle, this sacred space, we see ourselves, even though we're not physically together, in a circle. And the reason African people use circle is because there's no beginning, no end, no top, no bottom. Everyone is equal in that space. And every one of us have equal access to the center, which is the space of power. As we think about that, we also acknowledge our elders. We acknowledge them because they are the shoulders on which we stand. They worked their way, prayed their way, our way, and hoped our way into existence. So we honor them today. And we honor our ancestors who have been shoulders for our elders. We honor them for their sacrifices, their love, their kindness, and most importantly, we honor them because they're closest to our Creator. In this circle, we have divine order and process. We believe whoever is supposed to be here will be here. Whoever is supposed to listen will hear. And we also believe that in that space, we abide in order and respect. So to do that, if we were in a real circle, we would have a talking stick. So we use a virtual talking stick and we pass it to one another. And the rules of the stick include the person holding it has the floor. And the person who needs it, you can raise your hand if it's out of order. And you can say if something's burning, which I do frequently, ask for the stick, or you will be passed to you by another as the spirit moves. So right now, I'll give the talking stick to our Baba Al McFarland. Here's the stick.
Thank you, Dr. B, and I received the stick. Well, let me use that opportunity to introduce our special guest today. Cheryl Thomas is the founding director of Global Rights for Women. Since 1993, she's worked with partners around the world to promote women's human rights and achieve effective systemic and legal reform to end violence against women and girls. She's participated in the drafting of laws on violence against women and girls and trained stakeholders to enforce such laws in dozens of countries. She's worked closely with the United Nations to develop model standards for violence against women laws. She's led a global consultation on the enforcement of laws in Spain in 2015, for instance. She co-chaired the United Nations expert group meeting to draft a UN handbook for legislation on violence against women. In 2021, she received the Arabella Bab Mansfield Award from the National Association of Women Lawyers. And in 2014, she received the Myra Bradwell Award from the Minnesota Women's Lawyers. In 2011, she was recognized by Newsweek magazine as one of 150 women who shake the world. Her former positions include Director of Women's Rights Program at the Advocates for Human Rights, Executive Director at Watch, Partner and Shareholder at Briggs Morgan Law Firm, Special Assistant Attorney General at the Minnesota Attorney General's Office, and Adjunct Professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. Cheryl Thomas, it's a pleasure to meet you. Greetings. Thank you for coming to join us. And I'm going to hand the talking stick to you and just tell us what's on your mind and what the world needs to know right now.
Oh, thank you so much, Al. It's such an honor to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. And, you know, it's interesting that you probably know this, but maybe some of your guests do not, that this week is the part of the 16 days global campaign to end violence against women and girls. Wonderful. Yeah, I'm seeing nodding heads. And December 8th here is International Human Rights Day. So it's just a wonderful time to be with you on your show. I just recently got back from travels in Eastern Europe, and I just have to tell you how devastating the situation is in our world today. I always come back from meeting with our partners and allies around the world just so inspired with hope and kind of a common vision for a different world that we know we can achieve, and one that's equal, more healthy, more productive for everybody. So thank you again for having me.
Well, take the time to talk about your work and the status of your work, the report that you want to give to community about where we are and where we still must go.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. We still are facing after centuries of this in the past, much less documented than it is now, but we have a global pandemic of violence against women and girls. Every country that I've traveled to and over the last 30 years, and that's been around 70, faces this problem. Most of the violence is perpetrated by people that women and girls know, and most of it's in the family. In fact, we just got a report from the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. You may have seen that this is new now. 89,000 women and girls were killed intentionally in 2022 across the globe. So, that's just on average, that means more than 133 women or girls were killed by someone in their own home every day. And those statistics still make me very emotional. It's such a hidden pandemic. We during COVID, we called it a shadow pandemic, but in fact, I think in some ways COVID was the pandemic when you compare just the devastation that women went through when they were told to stay home. When we know that That's actually the most dangerous place for women and girls. So what Global Rights for Women does, Al, is our mission is laser focused on systemic and legal reform on violence against women and girls. We do only at the invitation when we're working anywhere globally. We work here locally also. We partner with the local NGOs are the best partners. We feel like the United Nations, of course, is a great partner too. They have such a reach to improve the laws, policies, and practices that are really mostly so new around the world to address violence against women and girls. And we do that through research and training and capacity building of all kinds at the invitation of partners.
You mentioned the report, a press release from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime.
Right.
Reports in its headline that more women and girls killed in 2022. Numbers fall.
Isn't that just
That's
tragic?
What the report is saying, yeah. And as you said, 55% or 48,800 of all female homicides are committed by family members or intimate partners. And that underscores the disturbing reality that home is far from safe. And you mentioned that scares me, that the place you think is safe and the pandemic kind of bore it out, created more danger for women and partner violence. So this is a big issue. This sort of dovetails with the conversation we had last week, Dr. Oliver, about violence in families. And let me pass the talking stick to you, Dr. Oliver, to bring in and extend our conversation last week into the topic today. Dr. Oliver, here's the talking stick.
Thank you. I received it. Thank you, Al. Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, Oliver. Nice to see you.
See you too. The thing I think about as you're talking about your work is that, it happens within families, as you said, but it is also challenges within the community. And then depending on where you're from, whether it's Eastern Europe, whether it's Africa, that there are challenges in terms of how women are treated in those different circumstances that put them more at risk. Right. And that not everybody tries to think about the issue in the same way as we might in the United States. And it's been interesting to me in some of my travels that, I remember back in the day, and I'm talking years ago, where when people had conversations about intimate partner violence, oftentimes women wondered what their role was in influencing it. And family therapy ended up treating domestic violence as though it was interactional. You could negotiate it.
Yeah.
And you could never negotiate it.
No.
And the person that does the violence is 100% of the violence. I was lecturing at Kenyatta University, and I got a lot of questions from young ladies that were in the audience, and they were wondering what their role was in causing it. And, I had to go back to what we talked about in the early days of the field, where it says for the person that does the violence is 100% responsible for the violence.
Thank you for that, Oliver. Thank you for saying that.
and so we have to rethink how we deal with it. And even in same-sex relationships.
Absolutely.
So we have to be able to look at the person that initiates the violence, the primary aggressor.
Primary aggressor.
That's 100% responsible for that. After you get past the violence, then you can negotiate the relationship.
Exactly, Oliver.
People don't know that you have to address that and rethink it. And, those have been things that we've been trying to evolve around.
Yeah.
Over the years. So I appreciate your work.
Oh, thank you. That's so insightful. I just so appreciate your saying that. Okay for me to respond here, Al?
Go ahead. He's passing the stick back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was just got to say, I just mentioned I was in Eastern Europe, and I was in a meeting there with, this is so true what you say, that women are expected, there's still some kind of, whether you call it blame or some role or something that is put on women who are victims of violence to somehow stop it, negotiate it. And there's such an inclination to do mediation all around the world. We see that here too. And that just doesn't recognize this entrenched power imbalance between a survivor of violence, a victim of violence, and her aggressor. And I say her because, when we were talking about intimate partner violence, it's mostly women. But that is still such a misunderstanding around the world, that there has to be, I just feel like we as a global community everywhere have to recognize these global entrenched inequalities, one of which is patriarchy and the identification that so many men are kind of socialized to believe that power and control define them. And you've said all this long before I have, Oliver, define their masculinity. And there's so much room for growth about just understanding that social dynamic that underlies, I believe, this global pandemic of violence against women and girls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me take a second to sort of lay out Dr. Williams' credentials here as well. I mentioned he's a professor at the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, but he was also the executive director of the Institute on Domestic Violence in the African American Community from June of '94 to September of 2016. He served as the project director of the African Immigrant and Domestic Violence Initiative from 2010 to 2016, and the Safe Return Initiative that addressed prisoner reentry and domestic violence from 2003 to 2016.
Oliver's an icon in the field for all of us.
Directed African American Domestic Peace Project, and that works with community leaders in 12 cities across the U.S. It worked with leaders in 12 cities across the U.S. He worked there between 2008 and 2018, and he's worked in the field of domestic violence for more than 35 years. He's a clinical practitioner working in mental health, family therapy, substance abuse, child welfare, delinquency, domestic violence, and sexual assault programs, and has worked in battered women's shelters, developed curricula for batterers, intervention programs, and facilitated counseling groups. And so that's why this conversation is so rich and so important. There's such a wellspring of knowledge at this table right now. Let me bring one more voice into the conversation, and that's Cheryl LaChapelle. Cheryl, how are you? Cheryl is a nurse practitioner with a variety of arenas of nursing expertise, but she's also an entrepreneur and a guiding light, a political activist in our community. Cheryl, how are you?
I am fine. Thank you for inviting me. Hello, everyone. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello, Cheryl. So nice to meet you.
Cheryl, weigh in on the general topic here, and that is creating structures, legal structures, and more to protect women, to recognize that the problem is the perpetrator and that there's a need for addressing that problem. I want to, before we leave, Cheryl, I have you and all of us talk about this question of patriarchy and the question of the assumption and the training of men to think that women are property and that they have a right, that it's actually their duty. And some men probably feel they are failing if they don't act in what they perceive, I think, misconstrue as some kind of divine instruction to treat their children and particularly women in their lives like they treat other non-human things that they possess. Cheryl, passing the talk to you.
Thank you. My perception of this and belief system is, I agree, the patriarchy that controls society and has always still exists. And anything happening to a woman is most possibly her own fault. What did you do? Were you dressed inappropriately? Were you flirting with him? You knew that man was unavailable. Why did you do that? Why did he have to correct you? Why were you being so loud and disrespectful to him? It's always our fault. Until women stand up and say, we will no longer accept any blame for being battered, raped, or otherwise manhandled in any way, it will continue. We have a victim mindset instead of the mindset that we deserve to stand up and be respected for who we are, no matter if we walk down the street naked. We deserve to be respected and not touched unless we say so. How to get women to wake up and understand that they are in control of their destiny, their body, and their lives. That's a hard one, because when Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, you look at all the women who crossed over to vote for a man who says he grabs them by the and who totally disrespects women in every way, and had been accused on multiple occasions of deviant sexual activity, forcing himself on women who clearly did not want it. Yet women, and I hate to say this, white women elected this man.
Yes, they did. Say it.
Thinking, ooh, you say you're a Christian. Well, everything he's doing is non-Christian, but you voted for him. This man's a rapist. He's a liar. He's all of these things. And basically what that said to me was that women did not feel that a woman should be commander-in-chief. We're our own worst enemies. That we're not going to have Hillary commanding the military. We're not going to have her be the ultimate voice in this country. Whereas most of Europe and countries in Africa have had women as presidents, chancellors, and whatnot. Germany, Merkel, she's great. We had two in England and other things, Holland. So what's wrong over here that we as women don't respect ourselves, don't love ourselves, and don't think we are leaders or deserve to lead or can be trusted? Because in essence, we've been leading all along our children. Exactly. We raise these people to disrespect us, those who do. But we have always operated behind the throne. It's time for us to be on the throne. So I'm going to pass the talking stick back to Cheryl.
Oh, I could not agree with you more, Sherlyn. I often think, as you were talking, I often think these systems of oppression are so connected. You think about obviously racism, misogyny, sexism, autocracy.
Yes.
The idea that your introduction was so beautiful, Al. This circle, and in the center of it is power, and the human spirit in all its forms. That's what we have missed. We have allowed this to happen for whole populations to be subjugated, and we're socialized that way. I mean, I think, Sherlyn, I'm a product of the patriarchy in some ways as much as my male family members. I was taught to stand behind. This is, I'm an older woman. I think we've made a ton of progress around the world this way, but we have so far to go. And I will tell you, I raised my 3 sons to be what I think are better feminists than me, because they were born, they have it in their very bones. We can do this. We can do it on an individual basis, and we can spread that to our communities and globally. Holding in our hearts exactly what you said, Al, I think is that center, that circle rather than the triangle of power.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Who do you want to pass the talking stick to?
Oh, well, then I get to pass it. Okay, I want to hear let's hear what Oliver has to say about all that.
No, I agree with you a ton, and I think about this issue and the way that we sort of have to evolve and grow out of it. But there, if we want to talk about something current, I think about that situation of the woman in Texas that and the Attorney General. What's wrong with him? Sonia and I had an incident where.
Well, take a minute, Oliver, and talk about the Texas story. Don't leave us.
Yeah, some people
let us know what that means.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a woman who is pregnant and she wanted the child, but the child's health is the fetus's health is not good, and as a consequence, she's going to lose the child. But in addition, her life and her capacity to be able to have children in the future are going to be affected by that. And the Attorney General in Texas decides that what he wants to do is to hold any physician that tries to give her aid is going to have a legal consequence if he provides any response to her well-being. Years ago, God blessed us to have our son Samuel, and Sam is now 32, but many moons ago, when Sonia and I were trying to have children, we dealt with reproductive challenges, and God blessed us with Sam. And so Sam was in preschool, and there was something called Fifth's disease. We had never heard of it before. But it's something that can happen. It's like you've got 5 diseases, chicken pox, measles, mumps, etc. And so this 5th disease was the 5th disease that you could have. So Sam was in preschool. Sonia went to pick him up, and then we stopped hearing the heartbeat of the baby. And as a consequence, we found out that Sonia had to wait a few weeks before she could go in and see the doctor, because she didn't want to expose other pregnant women to what she had. Well, Sonia had to have a procedure because the baby had died in utero. And so to have that procedure would be the same thing that Sonia needed to go through to be able to deal with the challenge. But with this child, they knew that this woman's child in Texas was not going to survive. And she wanted to have the procedure rather than having to wait weeks and weeks or to deal with consequences, medical complications associated with it. And so as I think about it, I just think that the Attorney General should just shut up and get out of the way. And, to me, I'm thinking, if you don't know much about it and doctors understand it and women understand what they're going through, shut up and get out of the way. And let those things that need to happen. Woman talked about the fact that she wanted to welcome a healthy baby child into the world. It wasn't an issue about using abortion as a birth control strategy. But it's a woman's choice, and so I guess I look at that, and then to me, that's another example of power and control.
It totally, exactly. I'm sure Lynn and I agree about that.
And that, so I just think that there's some places that we just don't need, as men, we don't need to be, to try to suggest something for an ulterior reason, and to be able to export what we deem to be our power. The other thing is the fact that I've been in a relationship. Sonia and I've been married for almost 40 years. I'm not always the smartest person. There, oftentimes she is. And so, in terms of dealing with wisdom or some right that I'm supposed to have in terms of dealing with things, I don't claim that. You know, sometimes I do things that are good, and sometimes I don't. And but you know, and Sonia sometimes does things that are outstanding. Sometimes it's not. But I don't proclaim to be smarter than her. There have been times that she's been exceptionally smarter and wiser than I've been. And so and that's why I don't understand this notion of men supposedly being dominant, you know, and they have the right to be dominant. And I keep talking about this, the misinterpretation of faith. Cheryl, did you ever meet Elizabeth Peterson?
Oh, the name sounds familiar. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, South Africa, and she has a South African Faith and Family Institute.
Nice.
She works with 9 different faiths in South Africa. And each one of them takes on the responsibility of certainly dealing with faith, but deals with child abuse and neglect, deals with violence against women. And in some communities, the faith leaders are the ones that have to reach out and try to intervene. And each community gets a chance to examine the faith. But we did this thing in South Africa, in Cape Town, where we had 9 different faiths there. And each one we had Jewish, we had 2 different sects of Islam, we had Christian, we had traditional South African faith and discussions and Christianity. And each one had a chance to go over the interpretations or misinterpretations of how some people direct themselves, Baha'i, direct themselves to be in control of circumstance, and how that was a misinterpretation. One of the things that I found fascinating was the fact that in Islam there was a group of faith leaders, Islamic imams, that ended up creating a play that talked about how people misuse faith to justify violence against women, but that's not what the Quran said.
Absolutely.
And that there are different ways that you can respond. And they, in the play, and it was a musical, they showed how they should respond correctly in dealing with the circumstance. And so I really appreciate that. But the fact that people are enlightened to be able to review the faith text and to examine the way that they're supposed to interact and be loving and caring to people, you know, in their relationships, which is what God expects.
It's so interesting how religion has been so often twisted into this authoritarian tool in so many ways.
Yeah.
Well, let me jump in for a second, if I may, just to ask Cheryl to go into the specific strategies you've employed to change the law and your assessment now of whether changing the law is enough.
Or is
it just one step? What else has to happen?
Yeah.
And sometimes it is reliance on the legal system to, you know, do things that need to be done. Also a way to take other accountabilities away.
Of course.
So go into that and maybe talk about the specifics of your work in different places.
Yeah, and we've seen that here in Minneapolis, as we also painfully know how the criminal justice system has been abused to brutalizing people of color. So let me just say that right off. So absolutely, the law can be manipulated, abused. I do feel that we have suffered globally for lack of very clear, strong human rights-based laws that prohibit violence against women. Domestic violence and sexual assault are the most common forms of violence against women around the world. And I think the lack of those laws Just really in the last 20 years, we've seen those proliferate around the globe, thankfully. They need to be very carefully monitored for not only the effectiveness in their meeting their goals of victim safety and offender accountability, but also monitoring for abuse of those laws against vulnerable populations. So it's really interesting. I'll say this because I think lots of people don't know it in Minnesota, that Minnesota has an incredible, Oliver does, he was part of it, he is part of it, an incredible legacy on systemic reform and legal reform on violence against women and girls. The first shelter in the country, possibly the world, opened in St. Paul in 1972. Some of the first laws prohibiting domestic violence and sexual assault were passed in Minnesota. Just right in the late 70s, the coordinated community response, which is a model, of award-winning global model now for the effective survivor-centered enforcement of laws. That was created in Duluth, Minnesota in the 80s. Yeah. So that, when you say, what's your methodology? When I left my, traditional practice of law and started volunteering at a human rights organization, which is now the Advocates for Human Rights, we looked around. Women's rights were not considered human rights. Violence against women, the most tolerated, extensive violation of human rights around the world, was not considered a human rights violation and not been articulated that way. So, we've been part of a global movement that's taken the tools that have developed in Minnesota, certainly, but in other places, and examined them and worked with partners to adapt them to their own community situation, led by survivor voices. Will this law work? They know best. Survivors know best. Families of femicide victims know best. We talk to those people at the front lines and adapt the tested tools we found useful here in the United States to respond to our partners' requests for expertise and experience from around the globe. Yep.
So to the question of patriarchy, how do you see systemic global cultural change that moves us away from patriarchal systems that support and are sustained by violence in general, and violence against women in particular?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a very big question. And patriarchy, let's just say, is well entrenched and now being supported by the proliferation of autocrats around the world. And we've seen that. You mentioned Donald Trump, Sherlyn, it's name, Orban in Hungary, and Modi and Erdogan, and on, the new leader of Argentina. And so we've got, we're having a backlash. I tie these systems of oppression all together. I mean, that's, we all know that they're intersectional. They feed on each other. And I think Oliver's story about what's happened in this kind of climate of autocracy and the grasping to power and the situation of women's entitlement to reproductive choice has also been sacrificed for that. But want to control women's bodies one way or another. That intense need just persists and has been growing in the last year. But you asked me, what's my vision? What's my hope? And it's the people, the leadership of individuals who are intrepid and persistent is also growing. I have, when I started this work 30 years ago, there were, and I started in the former Soviet Union, so there are 29 countries there. So little acknowledgement of the power that men maintain over women through violence. And now almost every country in that region have new laws, new leaders, new government, buy-in on ending violence against women and promoting women's human rights. When I was in Latvia just last week, they ratified the Council of Europe Convention on Violence Against Women. The government did. It was a huge breakthrough for not only Latvia, but as an example for the whole region. These things have a ripple effect that will require the government to modify their laws and the enforcement of them so that they are centered on women's safety and equality and offender accountability.
We recently had an interview with one of the people that was responsible for creating Minnesota's Office to study violence against Black women and girls.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's a major step, I think, in the right direction. Let me pass the talking stick to Dr. B. We lost you for the technology for a second there, but glad to see you back. What are your thoughts, Dr. B?
I have so many. They've just been flying through my mind as I was able to catch parts of the show. But I actually have a very big comment and question for Cheryl. For those of us who do this work, especially you who have gone to some really scary places speaking truth to power, yep. I hope I didn't miss, how have you stayed safe?
Oh, thank you for that, Bravada. And I don't always feel safe, running around the world or even here, as a woman, we aren't safe. But as a human rights defender, we call them, there has also been a backlash against human rights defenders and women in particular, to scare them and threaten them from doing the work. I feel very fortunate that, our methodology is that we don't go anywhere where we're not invited. And that's core to our philosophy, because we can't, we need the local folks lead the way, and we offer our expertise, our solidarity, our training, all of that. So we're always hosted. I'm always hosted by a solid human rights leader of either in the NGO or United Nations or government community. So we all of our staff, when we go, we've got very strong connections right in the community, and I feel guilty sometimes about how careful they are about, you're gonna stay here, you're not gonna walk here, you're gonna do this. They know their community and how to keep themselves and their guests safe.
How about, though, the cultural oppression, the oppression that is in the culture, in the air, in the media, mm-hmm. the expectation, and that speaks to the whole notion of patriarchal violence, the teaching, the training, and the nurturing of the attitudes that support violence against women that you are addressing by supporting legal strategies in communities. Does that violence pose a threat to your own health, your mental health, for example, or to all of us in ways that you have to acknowledge as part of the work that you do?
Of course. I mean, we are living in a violent global culture. I don't feel any safer, seriously, going to the grocery store or a school or a movie theater here in this country. Talk about violence. Than I do walking down the street in Dushanbe or Manila or wherever else I am. I really don't. We're a very unsafe country. So that piece, is how I look at, our work. I have many of our partners saying, when my kids were in school, how do you send your kids to school in the United States? Mm-hmm. It's so dangerous. They're going to be killed. I'm speaking generally about violence. So, but yes, I think it affects us all just to be living in this culture of the growing grasping for power that so many mostly men, are doing around the world on all levels.
Mm-hmm.
On all levels, the global, the national, the local, the in the home. It's frightening. It's I feel fortunate that I can do the work that I do because I have to do something. It's a path we cannot continue going down.
Yeah. I want to talk and stick for a minute, because one of the things that I think that I see the world as a Black woman in its skin, and even before it got as bad as it is now, I still was not safe. And I feel like there's a hierarchy for safety. One in which white-bodied women can go to a space that a Black-bodied woman cannot. And when we think about the shift in power, who's holding the power? White men. And I think white women must have felt much safer before they overturned Roe versus Wade. Because then that feeling that your civil rights could be violated and taken away, that they could once again control your body. My body as a Black woman historically has not been mine for 400 years. And the realization that they can change the law to take your body again is terrifying to me. And so trying to be brave and bold and open, just like I'm hearing from you as a white sister, it takes some, not a lot of courage, more than courage. It takes soul sacrifice. You have to go deep in your soul and say, everything I value may be destroyed because I say don't, because I say stop, because I say it's wrong, because I say it's hateful. And I see you've managed to do that. And that is miraculous to me as I hear you bearing witness of those scary, gut-wrenching experiences of allowing and teaching other women, other communities to be courageous enough to speak truth to power, to have voice, knowing that generations rest on our shoulders. That's what I've just heard today.
Oh, Pravada, thank you for that. You know, you're absolutely, I'm so grateful for your making this really clear. Black women have insight into the issues of oppression like nobody else. And I just am honored to hear you, to hear you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
And thank you, sister.
Sherlyn, thoughts?
Yes. Listen to Dr. B and Cheryl. I'll say there's one other thing. What's going on in Texas, I think it's great. I think it's fabulous. Why? Only something so terrible will make those women wake up and throw those people out who are legislating against them. It's got to really get bad before they get sick of it and take action. Otherwise, they're doomed to lose more and more of their autonomy because they have allowed this to occur. They have elected these scoundrels, and starting with the head scoundrel, Donald Trump, but they have elected these people who don't view them as people, as whole human beings, as anyone capable or empowered to make their own decisions. So until things get to the point where they say no, never again, it will get worse. So maybe we haven't reached the tipping point yet. That's when things will change. That's when these people that need to be gone will be gone. Same thing for the rest of the United States. We sit back and we allow these people in power who do not have our best interests. And it doesn't just include women. It includes white people in poor communities, on the Iron Range in the South, where they don't have resources, insurance, and they operate by keeping us frightened of each other, telling us that if you allow Obamacare, which is health care for everyone, if you allow that, then those people will have health care. Not thinking about, even though they know, because it's been told to them, that you will lose your home if you become ill, because you will have to mortgage your home. Keith Ellison, our Attorney General, was talking about this book, and I bought it. I forget, it was something about whiteness. When I think about it again, I bought it. But basically, it's speaking about that. And one farmer who they asked him about Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, he said, no, I don't want it because those foreigners, those Mexican, and those Black people have it. So I don't want it. And they said, do you know that if you become sick, you could lose everything? I don't care. I don't want it. You can't make me take that communist insurance. Crazy. He's voting against his own best interest to the extent that he will impoverish his own whole family. But worse than that, there will be a limit to the free services he will get at the hospital, because the top buck, as a nurse, I can tell you, the more expensive health care that could save his life or prevent some really serious morbidity or mortality, he will be excluded from because of lack of insurance. Now that's crazy. So Cheryl, I'm going to pass the stick to you.
Thank you. Well, don't you think so much of that is that just the misinformation and the lies that have perpetuated? People don't have the facts, because we've had this trend in leadership to just lie about what is happening, what is I'm talking about our former president Donald Trump, just the gross misinformation that people, and I really too feel like the just, you know, without just robust effort at public education to just get those facts to kids at a very young age, and more so to build the skills of critical thinking. Allow people to question these kind of authoritative leaders who care nothing for them as people, only as tools for their power. So anyway, that's my.
Let me take a break for a sponsored message and come back and wrap it up. We'll be right back. I'm Al McFarland. This is The Conversation with Al McFarland, the Healing Circle. We'll be right back. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. We're back. I'm Al McFarland. This is The Conversation with Al McFarland. Cheryl Thomas is here, along with Sherlyn LaChapelle and my co-host, Dr. Oliver Williams and Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya. Let me do what I do, and let's throw some mess in the mix. And it's something that I know we don't have time to really respond to, but I'll throw it out there for us to think about. Now, I had a great conversation a couple of days ago with the Consul General for Israel, for the Midwest. And I invited him on the program to use the platform to tell the story of the conflict that's going on right now between Israel and Gaza Strip, the Hamas Israeli war. And my intent was to be a good listener, is to ask him to explain it and to not, not interfere with his description. And he talked about the atrocity of the invasion of Israeli land and the carnage and the number of thousands of people that were killed and taken prisoner, and described the violence that took place. Then he talked about, from their point of view, the only response is to eradicate the problem. And I raised the question with him respectfully, does that mean, you're not going to stop until there is no more Hamas? And no more Hamas, from where I stand, means no more Palestinians. That's the question. And so how does this question of violence that we're talking about, this interpersonal, bubble up to be international, global? And is there a path for humanity? And if there is one, I'm sure, Cheryl, it's got to be something that's personal and global at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Cheryl, what do you think? I'm passing the talking stick back to you.
I know the devastation is just, there's no words for it in that region. I always come back to, I'll put this right out there, the power of the feminine that's been lost in our world. Mm-hmm. And I just, that's my vision, is that if we can release women from the shackles that they've been bound by, and, that they're, and, women in the broadest sense of the word, anybody who, has those traditionally feminine, just draw to nurture and love and care, and that's my view, the only way forward.
Dr. Oliver, and then Dr. B, you can close us out.
Well, I guess one thing that I think about it, there's a young man that is actually at Hebrew University. He's Palestinian, and Palestinian Arab, and Muhammad. And we had conversations about things, and he deals with child abuse, neglect, and also violence against women. And the thing that was interesting, we had a chance to talk about Islam and how people approach the issue. And so we talked about misinterpretations of Islam. He said, Oliver, what you're saying is right, but the expectation is that you have women who will attend mosque. In some parts of the world, there is no expectation that she'll attend. And therefore, the philosophies about what happened are driven by men. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I think about is when I can see people make themselves vulnerable enough to listen, mm-hmm. and listen to different voices, but also when I see people who have kindness in places where you don't expect, and people that open themselves up to kindness. And the thing that I see in situations, I think about ideologies, negative ideologies that I see, mm-hmm. from Trump and his minions. When I see the lack of education and cutting off education, and not preparing ourselves for the future. Younger people don't know what older people know. And we have to educate younger people to be able to take steps in ways that can be healthy. And so those are just some thoughts that I had.
We've got about a minute, Dr. B, a little bit over, but have you close us out, if you would.
I will, and I thank you for that. There's a Yoruba proverb that there are actually two that I love. One is about seeing people as less than and putting the onus on them to meet up to the expectations of others. And that one is, they who cannot dance will say the drum is bad. And so getting blamed for being the drum is what I see happening. And then the final one is, the axe always remembers what the tree always remembers what the axe forgets. So when I think about the people of Israel who have been axed, now they are the axe. They are also the trees. So that space of healing requires putting the damn axe down. That's what I think needs to happen. And it needs to happen around the world. And I believe with my whole heart, women who have babies and populate the world, we care about them surviving just a little bit more. I'm just saying. So with that, I say drop the mic and come back next week for Healing Circle.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.